On Lyric Station, we kept a drawer for impossible things. It wasn't literal though if you'd asked the cadets. They could have pointed you to half a dozen lockers stuffed with contraband folktales and black market recordings from ships that never filed flight plans again. The drawer lived in our heads, in the negative space between shift bells, where the air smelled like coolant and burnt dust and recycled citrus. That's where we kept the good lies, half gods in the dark between stars, sailcraft that cut through vacuum on silence, the first mathematician who proved infinity could be bent with a wrench, and humans were the shiniest lie in the drawer. Old maps showed a smear of blue and green under the word Earth, then nothing. Ask 5 spacers and you'd get 10 versions. Violent poets, merciful berserkers, fragile apes addicted to heavy gravity, an extinction and a promise at the same time. Some nights a freighter captain glassy-eyed, patched sleeve, the sort who's outlived more ships than friends would raise a chipped cup to the monkeys who taught space how to swear, and everyone would laugh and drink and let the myth be. Soft around the edges. By day, I was the ranking logistics officer. Cade Aaron, keeper of shipping manifests, patron saint of fuel curves, forgiver of creative accounting. Glory was a word other people used. I fought numbers until they broke into neat lines and behaved. Our war was arithmetic. The Keth Dominion was methodical and hungry, and it had crossed the ribbon of red dwarfs like a knife through fruit, taking 6 anchorage worlds in 2 months. We were a station with too many mouths and not enough ships, stuck on the wrong side of the arm. My job was to compute miracles from dried-up lines. Miracles are above your pay grade. Chief Quartermaster Vale liked to mutter. Vale was older than rust and twice as stubborn. On my first week, she'd shoved a dented pen at me and said, "Turn this into 6 crates of coolant filters." When I'd stared, she'd added, "Not metaphorically. We found them disassembled into coin-sized discs hiding in snack dispensers. Bribe currency from a smuggler's union too efficient to be real." Lyrics was like that. Nothing spare, everything useful, especially the lies. Admiral Rellin Thayer commanded the station with a watchmaker's patience. She was the kind of leader you could set your day by, precise, unbending, and tired in the way stone gets tired. She walked the operations dome at the start of every shift, boots soft on the mesh deck, studying the shimmer of our last defensible route, as if she might slide the stars apart with her hands and make room for us. On the day the drawer cracked open, the dome was quiet in the way hospitals are quiet, every sound purposeful. We just received the Keth's latest terms. Surrender your personnel, surrender your fabrication cores, surrender your children for cultural integration. They loved that phrase. It tasted like antiseptic and grief. Thayer let the packet sit, unopened, between us like a dead insect. Then she said the word that flattened the room. Evacuation, she ordered. We burned the station. We saved the people. No one argued. We were beyond arguing. We were counting. Hera, our signals officer, a kid with a missing tooth and a laugh like a drop tray, started the broadcast cascade. Vale buried a curse and opened the emergency ration vault. I pulled up the evacuation trees. Every route out of Lyrics arched through contested jumps like thread through teeth. Somewhere deep in the station, the children's ward started singing the alphabet song. Off-key and brave. My hands remembered what to do even while my brain took the drawer of impossible things and slid it shut. That was when the gravity well rang. You don't hear it with your ears. You feel it in the knuckles, in the fillings in your teeth, in the little bird bones of the ear that still remember oceans. Mass shifted. Spacetime noticed. Alarms unfurled across the dome like angry flowers. The local net, already screaming with Keth intercepts and evac chatter, lit up with a new burst. Hera's face went pale, then flushed, then something else. "Contacts," she said, voice skating on disbelief. "Multiple no. I hang on hundreds. No thousands. That can't be right. Vector?" Thayer asked, steady, inbound, hard. Decils like they're carving wakes. The first images hit the dome's central display. Ships slid into focus from the render grain. They weren't Keth-no-gossamer fins designed to appease plasma winds. No curving arrogance. No decorative cruelty. These were slabs of intent. Hard angles, squared-off confidence. Their hulls were matte and ugly and honest. No rings, no sails. If a religion had built a screwdriver, it would look like that. Keth reinforcements. Someone whispered, because terror makes you unoriginal. No, I heard myself say. Look at the burn. The Keth loved asymmetrical thrust and veined little signatures. A poisoner's flourish. These engines were white-hot and dead straight. Like someone had decided physics deserved to be punched. This isn't Keth. Thyre neither blinked nor smiled. She watched the feed, a glacier holding the valley. The largest ship cut thrust and drifted in as if the universe were tolerating it. Our transceivers choked. The burst arrived not a negotiation, not a threat, not a sermon. It was music. A marching cadence, snares rolled tight, a metal heart remembering how to beat. And under it, an overlay, clean and sharp and translated into a dialect that tasted like coffee and oxygen scrubbers. And nights that run too long. To all non-combatant parties, hold your vectors, secure your civilians. A woman's voice, horse-like command that hasn't slept. This is the Terran Expeditionary Army. We are here. Hera made a noise that could have been a sob, could have been a laugh. Maybe it was both. My fingers squeezed the edge of my console until my knuckles went pale. Humans, Vale breathed, as if the word itself might bite. The Keth task force perched at our periphery rolled to meet the newcomers. Ugly green scratches against the black. The unknown fleet didn't flinch. Ships stacked into a lattice snow graceful arcs. Just geometry so certain it turned contempt into an angle. Drones exhaled from their bellies like razor-bright fish. The first exchange lasted less than an eye close. Where I expected flash and futile fireworks, the newcomers answered with kinetic lances that hit. No waste, no light. Just force applied with humiliating precision. 3 Keth cruisers became diagrams in a textbook. Their hulls cored like fruit. Clean sections for a student to admire. Holy, Hera started. Language, Vale said. But her voice was soft and scared and relieved. Ghosts don't play drums, I said. Only later would I realize how much I wanted that to be true. The dome erupted in contradictions. Cheers strangled by caution. Relief drowned by a logistics officer's panic. Help was here, yes, but help needed feeding, ammunition, heat sinks, coolant. If the Terrans were the myth the drawer had promised, they would burn hot and demand everything. My mind was already riffling the station like a thief. What could I break into bullets? What could I melt into rails? Where could I steal heat, breath, time? Comms, Thyre said. Open a line. Hera's hands shook and still found the right keys. Lyric station to a Terran command. We copy, we. She glanced at Thyre. We welcome assistance, Thyre said. It was as close as she would get to bless you. The reply came back quick, like we were already part of their orbit. Acknowledged, lyrics, anchor and hold. We'll keep the wolves off your sky. Unscreen, the wolves learned a hard lesson about prey. The Keth were relentless by design, a tide with knives, inevitable and impersonal. They weren't used as someone running toward their blades. The Terran drones didn't duel. They herded, cutting lines through Keth formations, sketching a corridor with empty space. The big ships moved like cities that had found a reason to hurry. Who are they? Hera asked, as if I might somehow know. Humans, Vale said again. And this time the words sounded less like fear, more like a tool she was weighing in her hand. I watched burn curves, temperature maps, munitions projections. Their logistics wasn't theater. It was a knife. Every shot fired had a home, a purpose, a matching absence waiting to be filled. Whoever was in charge of their supply lines had the same religion I did. No waste, no mercy. The Keth sent a packet downgrade to lyric surrender terms rewritten in a hurry. The arrogance pulled to thin. It spat cultural integration and genetic mercy and other words that mean, we will turn you into something that honors us. Thyre let the packet expire on the pad. Time? She asked. 7 minutes to intercept, Hera said. Less if they decide we're dessert. Then we buy 7 minutes, Thyre answered. And the dome moved with the obedience of a well-trained nerve. Defensive grids spun up. Civilians swept into hardened cores. Med bays unfurled like flowers as we moved. We told the old lie one more time, to ourselves, to the children. Humans were gone. Humans were a campfire story. Humans were a romance you tell a bruised sky. The largest Terran ship drifted like a cathedral. Its engines pulsed once, a heart deciding. Our air tasted like hot metal. My console flashed a handshake request. Accept. Hera asked, breathless. On screen, Thyre said, a face resolved, a woman in matte armor, helmet tucked under one arm, hair ragged from habit not vanity, eyes the color of old steel. Exhaustion balanced on the edges of her mouth like a bad joke she refused to tell. I'm Colonel Amaya Reyes, Terran Expeditionary Army, she said. We're late. That's on us. Thyre didn't smile. I don't think she knew how while the station was still burning. Admiral Rellan Thyre, Lyric Station. We'd written you off as a fireside story. Myth is just logistics with bad comms, Reyes said. A beat. We'll dock, if you'll have us. Our medics can take your overflow. Our techs can make your old bones sing. Permission granted. Thyre answered. The line cut. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath since childhood. When their clamps kissed our ring, the station groaned with a sound I'd never heard before. Relief. The airlock cycled and the Terrans came through in 2s and 4s, unsmiling, efficient. The kind of people who do triage in their sleep. They were disappointingly human. Tall, short, brown, pale, hair in a dozen disobedient styles, armor scuffed not stylish. Every panel on their suits labeled serial codes, maintenance schedules, warnings written like lullabies. To the next poor soul who would wear them, they moved like they'd blood together. A medic pressed a warm metal cup into my hand. Coffee, she said, with sugar. You look like you need it. I didn't cry, not then. The coffee tasted like iron and burnt hope and the first soft thing. In a long time, through the viewports, the battle turned from a blur to a pattern. The Terrans weren't winning by mass, they were winning by margin. Every time the Keth expected them to be just barely there, they were a little more. A fraction more thrust, a sliver more heat capacity, a hair more nerve. It's a cruel thing to fight a species with 10% more willingness to be unreasonable. They're shepherding, Hera murmured, brow furrowed, not killing. Both, I said. They're carving a path to something that matters. The Keth realized it too late. A scar of empty space opened around their command ship, a corridor bordered by nothingness and humiliation. The biggest Terran vessel leaned, like a boxer smelling victory. We didn't see the final hit. Not properly. The sensors screamed. The screens went white. Something big died very far away and still made our bones ring. Confirm, Hera said. Hands steady now, voice not. Keth command is out. Their secondaries are confused. Their tertiaries are gone. Thyre said nothing. Reyes didn't appear on our screens again. She didn't need to, out in the dark. The myth we'd hidden in a drawer put its shoulder against our sky and pushed. Lyric Station held evacuation posture for another hour. Because discipline is the last thing you surrender. Then the alarms stuttered and softened and became the kind of quiet where people start to laugh because they don't know what else to do. Children in the hardened cores stopped singing and started asking questions. So fast the caretakers had to triage curiosity. Vale found me at my console, my hands still moving, finding edges, feeding a fleet we didn't own yet. You look like someone just told you the oceans came back, she said. Vale, I asked, honest as a cadet. What do we do with a miracle? She snorted. You inventory it. I inventoried. I took stock of hope like it was ammo and air, outside. The Terrans turned their lattice and held, not leaving, not yet. The drawer for impossible things sat open in my head. Empty now except for a single label I could finally read. Humans. File under, accounting for the unreasonable. I closed my eyes and heard their drums again. Practical and defiant, counting time. For a species that had decided to knock on our night and announce itself like a debt collector. We had written them off as ghosts, but ghosts don't play drums, and this time, the beat was for us. They docked with us like it was a courtesy. The Terran boarding clamps kissed our ring and held without strain. When the airlock cycled, I braced for monsters or myths or both. They were people, tall, short, dark, pale, hair in 100 disobedient styles. Their suits were utilitarian matte, each panel labeled with serial codes that were either paranoia or poetry. The leader at the front removed her helmet and blinked in our light. Her eyes were the color of old steel and sleep deprivation. She smiled in a way that suggested smiling had been rationed lately. I'm Colonel Amaya Reyes, she said, voice hoarse but steady. We're late. That's on us, Admiral Thyre. who could turn a glacier to glass with a glance, nodded like she'd just met a mirror. I'm Admiral Relanthyre. We'd written you off as a fireside story. Reyes shrugged. Myth is just logistics with bad comms. She sent her people to our wounded like they'd rehearsed in 1,000 catastrophes. They carried packets marked with the sigil of a blue and white sphere. And every time one of my engineers cracked a seal, the room smelled like antiseptic and citrus. Terran medics triaged. Terran techs slid under consoles and made our aging systems sit up and beg. Someone handed me a metal cup, still warm. Coffee, the Terran said, reverent. With sugar. You look like you need it. I didn't cry. I didn't. But I tasted iron and smoke and something that might have been relief. The Keth didn't give us long to marvel. They reoriented, rallied, and sent a packet downgrade. Surrender terms with the florid cruelty of a species that believes language is a weapon. Colonel Reyes read it. She tapped her wrist. A projection flared a simple map, the station, the Keth fleet, and a grid that folded around them like a closing hand. We hold your station as an anchor. She said, we'll blunt their advance and push them off your sky. Admiral, with your permission, I'd like a liaison from your staff. She looked straight at me. I knew to things then, that she had asked around and learned exactly who could make a broken supply line sing, and that I was about to leave the only home I knew for a ship that made me feel like a child. Staring up at a storm, Logistics Officer Cade Aaron, Admiral Thyre said with a small nod. You're attached. Reyes offered that rare, rationed smile again. Welcome aboard the TEV Perseverance, Cade. I followed her through a corridor designed by someone who liked right angles and emergency lighting. The Perseverance felt weighty, not in mass, but in intent. Every console was scuffed. Every handrail shone where fingers had worried it. Humans wore their ships like heirlooms, not tools. When we reached the operations bay, a wall of displays unfolded with a clatter. Reyes didn't sit. She braced both hands on the back of a chair, as if she were about to shove the whole ship forward by will alone. Tell me about your enemy, she said. The Keth think in layers, I replied, falling into the litany of 1,000 briefings. They shell you with long-range kinetics while their pickets to the edges. Their command ships hide behind the cowardice of math. They like surrender. They like theater. A Terran at a console Nuyen, according to the patch snorted. Good. We brought an appetite. Reyes flicked a new overlay. The Terran fleet wasn't large by Keth standards, but it was dense. Discrete boxy ships big as cities nestled among smaller bristling escorts, and everywhere. Drones like bone-white birds. We don't win with mass, she said. We win with margin. Margin? I asked. 10% more gumption than the math says we should have. Nuyen answered without looking up. Reyes pointed. We'll cut their pickets with our drones, make them think we're stupid. Then we'll be stupid once right where it hurts. Cade, I want you building us a pipeline. Ammunition allotments, coolant budgets, fuel. If you can find me extra anything, I'll turn it into an enemy's bad day. It was the first time anyone had ever made my work sound like a weapon. The first hour of the battle was a study in audacity. Terran drones flashed forward on vector stacks that looked reckless until you noticed the pattern. A cadence like the drumbeat in their rival message. The drones cut crisscrossing lines through the Keth formation, pinpricks at first, then carving out whole mouthfuls of space where Keth ships weren't anymore. The Keth retaliated with a wall of green, but their shots came a fraction too late and a fraction too wide. Terran jammers didn't overwhelm. They misled. Margin, Nuyen murmured. Just enough. On the logistics board, I did what I was born to do. I bled every redundancy into necessity. I rerouted station coolant to their forward heat sinks. I decompressed unused habitat segments to provide a hard vacuum feed for their railgun barrels. I turned our vending machines into tungsten. The Perseverance's quartermaster, an older Terran, with a glare like a cutting torch, watched my improvisations and nodded once. Curtin approving. You do well on Earth, she said. What's Earth? I asked, trying to make it a joke. She paused. For a moment, nostalgia bent her impervious face. Home, she said. Also a pain in the ass. The Keth realized too late that the drones were shepherds, not wolves. The pack had corralled their command ship into a corridor of own making. Reyes seized the chance. All batteries, Chevron 26. Helm, give me a stupid burn. On my mark, the Perseverance leaned into the universe like an insult. The bridge lights went dim. The ship groaned a hymn to acceleration. The railguns spoke in a language no living creature was ever meant to hear. The Keth command ship tried to slide aside, too proud for panic. The first shot took its flanks off. The second corded at the spine. Every screen bloomed white. Confirm. Confirm, Nguyen said, voice clipped with disbelief. Keth command is out. Secondary and tertiary chains are blind. Reyes didn't cheer. She exhaled once, long and slow. Then they need a new story. We gave them one. For all their cruelty, the Keth weren't unbrave. They fought like the tide, inevitable, relentless, impersonal. But when their command vanished, something old and animal skittered across their mind. Humans didn't press. They pursued. Not out of bloodlust. Out of a species' deep refusal to let the thing that hurt your family walk away. Admiral Thayer to Terran Command, came the station's voice, thin with static. We can provide flanking fire, negative, Admiral, Reyes replied. Save your people. We'll take the heat. I wondered then who had taught the Terrans to talk like that. Who had carried this tone through 1,000 desperate exits? Maybe nobody. Maybe the tone had taught them Dodd in the chaos. A Keth cruiser broke formation and veered toward Lyric's station, engines hot. Weapons flaring a final act of spite. We didn't have the armor. We didn't have the guns. We had the drawer full of impossible things. And a human officer who looked at that drawer like a tool bench. Cade, Reyes said, eyes snapping to me, your vending machine trick. Can you do it with the station's docking pylons? I gaped. Turn them into what? Into no. I understood. The pylons were tungsten-wrapped round superconductor spines. If I cross-linked them and overfed the mag lines, I could turn the ring into a fist. I could refuse the Keth a path. I can do it, I said. Hands already moving, pulling power, stacking permissions, forging a channel through bureaucratic ice that had never imagined a day like this. Then do it yesterday, Reyes said. The Keth cruiser came into hot, its intent like a scream. The moment it crossed the ring, I fired. The station sang. The pylons flexed where they were never meant to flex. Metal remembered the ore it came from and became stubborn again. The cruiser's hull met a wall where space had promised none. Its bow crumpled like a lie. The shockwave rolled, then broke against the Perseverance's bulwarks. Admiral Thayer, steady in her dome, said nothing. Only later did I hear that she put a hand on the glass, just once. With the wonder of a child feeling rain for the first time that we held. No better, we didn't fall. By the time the last Keth ship cut its losses and bled back into the dark, Lyric's station was a graveyard of spent cartridges and heroic exhaustion. The Terrans didn't unfurl banners or make speeches. They checked corners, counted heads, and started asking where they were needed next. I expected them to leave us with our mouths open. Instead, the Perseverance stayed. In the days that followed, we learned the rhythm of the Terrans. They moved like the station was a patient, and they were the surgeons who'd already cut once, and were determined to close clean. They wrote orders like poems, short, strict, with one hard word per line. They swore with ingenuity. They slept where they fell and woke to coffee and movement. If a thing could be carried, it was carried. If it couldn't, a dolly appeared. And if no dolly existed, a private named Ibarra became one by sheer moral force. Our people tried to be subtle about staring. We failed. Humans were. Ordinary, and it shook us. We kept waiting for the myth to leak out, halos or hidden fangs, or the long cold arrogance of those who think history owes them its throat. Instead, they had knee braces and bad haircuts, and a humor that edged toward kindness. More often than not, they were not inevitable. They were intentional. Colonel Amaya Reyes didn't take the center of rooms. She took the corners, watching the angles. When she spoke, our chaos folded itself into lines that led to doors that led to answers. She gave away credit until it looked like weakness. And then when someone tried to take the wrong kind, she took it back with a surgeon's calm. Admiral Thayer met her in a posture of equals, the lean at the hip, the arms loose, the chin a few degrees toward the future. Neither saluted. We were past theater. The first formal council convened in the operations dome because there was nowhere else big enough. For the moment, Representatives came up from the machine decks with grease under their nails. Teachers from the Child Ring, the Quartermasters Guild, salvage unions, 3 elders from the Refugee Garden Arc. Even the freighter captains came, leaving their ships humming with patience on the tethers. The dome hummed with voices like a hive thinking. Reyes stood off to the side, hands behind her back, helmet at her hip, eyes sliding to me whenever the conversation veered toward supply. I'd slept 3 hours in 2 days and had the steady, stupid confidence of someone who doesn't plan to stop. "This is not a plea," Admiral Thayer said, and the hum softened to a listening. "It is an offer. We will not be anyone's subject. We will be allies or enemies. Choose." Reyes nodded once, slow. "We like allies," she said. "Enemies make us." Creative, bridled laughter. We were all too bruised for real mirth. Reality paced in circles around us. One station, a battered fleet. 1,000 Keth ships a bad decision away. "We can help you stand," Reyes continued, voice steady. "But we'll do it our way. That means you learn to bake your own bread and forge your own bullets. We'll give you the ovens and the anvils. We won't be your gods. You've a reputation for fists," one of the captain elders said, chin jutting toward the Terran armor. "Where were those fists when the Keth took children from Malari's moon?" Reyes didn't flinch. "Busy learning not to use them on ourselves," she said. "It took longer than it should have." "It always does. That's not comfort," he said. "It's not meant to be," Reyes replied. "It's context. Comfort comes later. If we earn it." The room shifted around that. Honesty rarely has good posture. It slouches, but it's hard to push over. We signed a compact. The Terrans brought out a rectangle wrapped in oilcloth like a treasure pulled from a ship's keel. When Reyes unfolded it, my breath hitched. Paper, actual paper. Cream-flecked fibers, heavy, a smell like dust and sun and decisions. "Some promises deserve the weight," Reyes said when she caught me staring. We debated wording as if it were a wiring diagram. Because it was obligations, rights, the mechanics of how not to become each other's problem. The Terran advocate, a thin man with a voice like gravel, and a patience that made the air gentler, insisted on one phrase. That Thayer circled twice with her pen. "Mutual refusal of cruelty as policy. Asterisk. That used to be controversial," he said, almost cheerfully. "Now we put it in the first paragraph so the monsters save time by leaving." I pressed my mark in ink that sank slowly. Reyes signed with a hand that had learned steadiness in recoil. Thayer drew a precise triangle, the old Admiralty sign. When we were done, Reyes folded the paper like a map, slid it into a chest pocket over her heart, and thumped the pocket once with 2 fingers. An oath hammered to the body. "What now?" Hera asked, small voice in the big room. "Now we shovel," Reyes said. "And we teach you how to like the calluses." The Perseverance turned our machine bays into classrooms. Terran instructors laid out tools like liturgies, torque wrenches, gauge blocks, coils of cable labeled in handwriting that made me absurdly happy. They taught us to build their drones out of whatever we had. Pressure vessel ribs became fuselage rings. Old superconducting bus rails became backbone spines. The copper from defunct art installations became nerve. They showed us how to harden software against Keth arrogance. Taught us to put decoys in places no decent program expects lies. A Terran sergeant named Salvi Broad, kind, with a voice like gravel dragged over truth, sat with our cadets on the floor and drew tactics on the deck with a grease pencil. "Bravery is a habit, not a mood," he told a boy who'd hidden his trembling hands under his thighs. "Practice it small. Stand up when you'd rather sit down. Say the hard yes. Say the harder no. Being scared is the tax you pay for being alive. Pay it and move." Chief Quartermaster Vale fell into a sparring friendship with the Perseverance's quartermaster, Chief Mora, an older Terran whose glare could weld. They prowled the supply decks like rival saints, trading inventory sins and indulgences. "You keep your good screws in the wrong bins," Mora accused, squinting at our hardware wall. "We keep them where thieves don't look," Vale returned. Mora grunted approval. "You've been educated by theft. That's a proper curriculum. I once turned snack dispensers into coolant filters," I offered. "Good," Mora said, without looking at me. "Teach me the recipe. We'll turn it into doctrine." Humor became lubrication. It made the bolts come loose. Humans cooked for us. They claimed it was diplomacy. I suspected it was a religion. In the mess, they made a stew that tasted like patience and spice, onions surrendering to heat. Protein from a tank I didn't want to examine too closely. They brought bread that crackled when it broke. A young medic named Tashi taught children to roll dough. The first time a loaf rose, a hush fell like a held breath. Then hands flew, and the room became joy. "What is this called?" A girl with braids asked, reverent. "Proof," Tashi said, dusting flour off her hands onto the child's nose. "It's called proof. At night, when the shifts turned and the air grew gentle, songs edged into corners. Humans sang quietly, almost apologetically, as if trying not to offend the dark. Work chants, nonsense verses, a lullaby about a ship that always found the wind. Our kids learned the choruses in an afternoon and gave them back twice as loud, which the humans accepted with the stoic kindness of those who've chosen to love a universe that will not love them back. I found Colonel Reyes alone in the docking ring one evening, helmet on her hip, staring at the starfield as if it had wronged her personally and might be coaxed into apologizing. "What do you see?" I asked, because I had almost earned the right. "Room," she said. "Room to mess up. Room to make it right. We thought you were myths," I said. "We built you out of the parts we needed. We thought we were, for a while," she admitted. "It's a tempting lie. Myths don't have to apologize. What do you call yourselves?" I asked, "when you're alone?" She glanced down at the patch on her sleeve, a stylized sphere, blue and white as if the idea of oceans had been distilled into geometry. "We have a lot of names," she said. "Nations, cultures, factions. But in the army," she tapped the patch, "we call ourselves human. When it matters, that's enough." A week into the compact, the Keth tested our seam. A cruiser ghosted in on a low burn, weapons cold, hull lit only by distance and malice. Old lyrics would have begged the intercept geometry to be merciful. New lyrics had a different posture. "They're probing the ring," Hera said over the general, voice steady like practice taking root. "Let them," Vale growled. We had wired the docking pylons the way Reyes had asked me to in the panic of the first battle. Only now the wiring had labels and redundancies and a proper kill switch that needed to hands. And a third person to nod. "Command?" Hera asked. Admiral Thayer looked at me. It took me a heartbeat to realize why. I was the operator. The ring was mine. "On your mark, Cade," she said. The Keth cruiser slid through our shadow, hopeful as a burglar. We didn't announce. We didn't preach. We waited until its nose crossed a line I had drawn on a map with a stub of pencil, and a cup of coffee going lukewarm at my elbow at 3 in the morning. Then I threw the switch. The pylons flexed like the ribs of a whale remembering the sea. The ring said no in a voice you couldn't hear but could not mistake. The Keth's bow crumpled like a lie. It tried to back out, stuttered, lost its nerve, cut hard away, engines flaring into shame. Our new-built drones ugly, beautiful unfolded from the bay like knives from a tailor's cuff, and escorted the cruiser off our lawn, taking careful, necessary bites. The cheer that went up in the dome wasn't wild. It was workmanlike. We had set a post and the fence had held. Afterwards, in the mess, the Terrans brought out a drum with a scar on its rim. Tradition. Sergeant Salvi said, "We beat it once when a line holds, not twice. Twice is bragging, and bragging tempts the physics." He lifted the sticks, looked at me. I shook my head and shoved the sticks at Hera. She beat the drum once, clean. The sound went through the station and came back older, later. Reyes posted a motto over the bay doors in paint that dried ugly and perfect. "Margin lives here." People started touching the letters as they passed beneath. Paint wore away where fingerprints insisted 1,000 times a day. The Perseverance delayed departure twice, once for a hull crack that refused to respect schedules, once because a convoy of refugees limped in on empty tanks and empty eyes. On the morning of the third departure date, I found Reyes in the machine bay, watching Chief Mora teach 3 of our apprentices the last Bolta-Terran ritual. "That said, you never leave a job with fasteners left over. You count your bolts," Mora intoned, sliding a hand into a box without looking. "You count your sins. If the numbers match, you sleep. You really make a theology out of everything." I told Reyes softly. She shrugged. "Helps us remember which way is forward." Forward to where? I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The dark held 1,000 fires. The Perseverance was a bucket brigade. Before they cast off, the Terrans left gifts. Not luxuries. Tools that made us aware of how many corners we'd cut to stay alive. A set of gauge blocks so precise they made our best calipers feel like gossip. A bin of heat paste labeled with a joke. A spool of cabling with a tag that read, "This is for when you'll know you need it." They left software hardening routines and diagnostic trees, and a recipe for bread scaled for a station population with humor in the margins. If your bread rises too fast, you brag to the dough. Apologize and add patience. They also left a small stack of blank paper, wrapped again in oilcloth, and a pen heavy enough to be a tiny weapon. "For your next compact," Reyes said, "with whoever you decide deserves one. Will that be you?" I asked. "Depends on how we behave," she said. "Hold us to it." We walked the docking ring together one last time. The clamps sighed. The umbilicals reeled. Dockhands swore in the happy way. Everything worked, therefore it could be mocked. A group of kids gathered near the viewport with Sergeant Salvi, who was telling a story about the first time he marched wrong on purpose, so nobody else would be embarrassed alone. Hera stood on a coil of hose and shouted things she'd pretend later she hadn't shouted. Chief Vale clapped Chief Mora on the shoulder hard enough to qualify as assault. Mora pretended to stagger, then slipped a small wrapped object into Vale's pocket without comment. "What was that?" I asked. "A bolt," Vale said after Mora had gone. "The last one off their line." "A promise." "And a dare." Reyes and I arrived at the lock. We didn't have anything left to say. Words were tools. We'd used the right ones. So we did the only thing that felt proportionate. We shook hands. Her grip was firm and warm and carried the tiny palimpsest of old scars. Mine was ink-stained and tired. Somewhere a drum waited for a single future strike. Behind us, the compact lay folded over Reyes' heart, creased where it had learned us. "Keep your ring stubborn," Reyes said. "Keep your margin," I said back. The airlock cycled. The Perseverance drifted, then pulsed with that secular halo of thrust. No anthem, no fireworks. Just a ship and an argument with the dark it fully intended to win. They left us drills and doctrine and bread and a drum. They left us alone on purpose, which is another way to say they didn't take our agency as payment for their help. We rebuilt lyrics with Terran tricks and our own stubbornness. The Kef came again, and the ring said no before we did. We hung a sign by the hatch where the children could read it. "Nitrogen monoxide gods, nitrogen monoxide monsters, neighbors." I still keep the drawer for impossible things. It's emptier now. There's only one object in it, a sheet of Terran paper, edges softened by touch, stained with 3 signatures and a coffee ring that refuses to fade. When new cadets ask if humans are real, I open the drawer and let them press their fingers to the proof. I make them feel the weight. Humans were never myths, I tell them. They were a story waiting for a chapter number, and when they ask how the chapter ends, I point at the blank paper the humans left us and the pen that weighs a little like a promise. It doesn't, I say. It keeps being written, by hands,